how worse can things get? The events that took place with the church shooting, the synagogue shootings that took place in Pittsburgh.
Well, one thing I got to keep in mind, Jim, sometimes what makes people so afraid or scared is the media. The media has two sides, I think.
There are certainly some people who can be inspired, so to speak, by the notoriety that can be attached to committing a heinous mass shooting.
People are realizing now it can happen where I work or I go to school.
Welcome to a special podcast presentation, When Crime Hits Home. The subject, mass shootings, what to do. If you work in law enforcement, behavioral health, social work, or the legal field, or you're a concerned citizen, you're about to hear from a panel of experts on what they see as the root cause and the reasons for the rise in mass shootings. You'll also hear ideas on what can be done about it. When Crime Hits Home is being brought to you by the Broward County Crime Commission. Here's President and CEO James D. Polisi.
What we try to do when we do these panels is we try to come up with dialogue, content, interaction, where we can come up with more solutions, elaborate on it, because the last thing that the Crime Commission wants to see is that people become numb to these types of events. Because I think it's important to understand that as these events continue to crescendo, it's not going to be long before it will be in someone's front porch or backyard. So now we're at our second topic of the day, which is the amount of mass shootings that have been taking place in the country and why they have been occurring at a crescendo level at all different aspects of whether it's grassroots within communities or whether it's more on a national scale. Certainly seems to be increasing. And we have a very prestigious panel with us in that manner. Mr. Gary Warren, he's with the Department of Homeland Security. Mr. Branch Walton, who's an advisory board to the Crime Commission, retired United States Secret Service. Mr. Eric Mercer, who's the Assistant Special Agent in charge for the ATF. And then we have Dr. Liza Gold, also on our advisory board, Judge James Martz, who was formerly a Broward County resident and is now a circuit court judge in Palm Beach County with the 15th Judicial Circuit. Special Agent Terrence Hunter with the United States Secret Service. And it's just my pleasure to have all of you. Why do you think that the numbers are spiking up right now?
With the ease of communications on social media applications and platforms, everybody's making concerning statements via social media. What I'm seeing is that a lot of the impetus of people's frustration, people's anger is just this political polarizing environment that we're currently living in. There's like a black and white political world where people are formalizing their opinions, and sometimes they're acting on how they feel based on their political views. Now, in my personal opinion, a lot of these issues are societal or domestic issues that manifest into basically criminal thoughts and criminal behaviors. It's pretty much political views and people willing to act on those views.
But I think another thing that we have noticed at ATF and that we're also being very aware of is the use of social media to vent their concerns. And what it seems to do is it seems to embolden a lot of people to commit certain acts. You see what we call keyboard warriors a lot of times. People would say things on social media that they wouldn't possibly say in person. They get worked up, they get really amped up, and to the point where they might go out and act.
You're listening to a special presentation from the Broward County Crime Commission's 9th Annual Juvenile Violence Webinar Conference Series. Is society creating a nation of active shooter events? If you work in law enforcement, behavioral health, social work, or the legal field, or if you're a concerned citizen, find out how you can be part of the next Juvenile Violence Webinar Conference Series on December 1st. By attending, you can earn continuing education hours. Yes, register for the next event on December 1st and earn continuing education hours in your field and work toward attaining the Crime Commission's distinguished Verbal De-Escalation Certification. Be part of the Broward County Crime Commission's 9th Annual Juvenile Violence Webinar Conference Series. Is society creating a nation of active shooter events? Hear the speakers, hear the ideas, learn solutions that we hope you will use in your profession, and earn continuing education hours. To register for December 1st, call 754 area code 423-1976 or register online at browardcrime.org. Again, call 754 area code 423-1976 or online at browardcrime.org. Brought to you by the Broward County Crime Commission. Finding solutions to problems.
Essentially, when you look at it from the perspective of the alcohol to tobacco and firearms, obviously this is something that when these shootings take place, your agency or entity in terms of what you all do, obviously this comes on your radar immediately. Is there anything that you could allude to or provide insight on why some of these numbers may be spiking up?
In my personal opinion, based on my investigations, with the ease of communications on social media applications and platforms, everybody's making concerning statements via social media. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of the impetus of people's frustration, people's anger is just this political polarizing environment that we're currently living in. Now, in my personal opinion, a lot of these issues are societal or domestic issues that manifest into basically criminal thoughts and criminal behaviors. And then when they make statements or they come to our attention and they have concerning feelings, that's when myself and the people that I work with, that's when we have to go talk to them. And we take our time and we try to find out what is the underlying issues for why you make such a statement and what do you mean by these statements. When you get to talk to these people, you understand that they feel like government has failed them, or that the opposite political party may be so wrong that they're adamant about their feelings that they may act upon them. So in short, I would like to just answer your question that what I see as an impetus for why things are spiking is pretty much political views and people willing to act on those views.
Judge March, what's your opinion? Because I think you participated in the 2019 forum as well of why things are spiking up.
When I grew up, if a reporter wanted an opinion on something, they went to an expert in the field and they got the opinion and they reported that expert who was recognized in their field as an expert. And that was the person that's voice that you heard talking about the issue. Now, 15 minutes on Google with a YouTube, and you're an expert at anything. I can do brain surgery in 15 minutes if I can find the right YouTube, I'm sure of it. And that has put us in a position where almost every media outlet, you will see them say, Bob at Boxer Rocks says this, that, and the other thing. And you say to yourself, oh my goodness, here is somebody who got national media attention, and we have no idea who that person is, what their motives are, what their expertise is. But by gosh, a whole bunch of people are going to quote them all over town if it's the opinion they want to sell that day. And that's a huge problem. So they use the internet and they use social media to be able to purvey their non-mainstream thoughts and make it look like mainstream. I also think we need a stronger message from our leaders. Our leaders need to behave. As I work here in the court, I try and be a role model to the people that come before me. And generally it works. If I set the tone in the room, people will usually unwittingly follow the tone in the room. I think we need to do the same thing on a national level, on a local level. Our politicians need to step up. They need to act like civilized representatives of our communities. And I think people will follow better.
Dr. Gold, do you think psychologists have something valuable to contribute to the mass shooting incidents in terms of why they're happening and what can be learned from them to preempt them and prevent them for the future?
Yes. When you look at the profile of people who commit mass shootings, they don't happen in a vacuum. They're people who have certain kinds of commonalities in their histories. So, for example, there's often a history of previous acts of violence. There's often a history of previous acts of violence. They have behavioral histories that are consistent with violent and angry acting out. And so if you can identify the areas where these folks have violent and angry acting out, and you can tailor interventions to reduce those. So that's one area. So common area is domestic violence. So a lot of mass shootings are actually incidents of domestic violence where a woman has gotten away from an abuser and the abuser doesn't know where she's living, but still knows where she works, for example, or still knows where she goes to church. And that's when those incidents happen. Many of them are murder-suicides. So if we were doing a better job in tagging individuals who are at higher risk for suicides, most mass shooters don't expect to survive the event. They either are committing suicide by cop or they kill themselves before they can be captured. They don't intend to survive. It's a suicide risk assessment somewhere on the line that might be able to identify them. So these are not people who jump out of a vacuum. They do have histories behind them. Some of them even have mental health histories, although that's not the majority. So in that sense, I think if you look at those kinds of profiles, not a psychological profile per se, because the psychological profile can be substance use, anger, angry people who use substances, who have a history of violent behavior. I mean, that could be tens of thousands of people, but you don't have tens of thousands, thank goodness, of mass shooters. So you kind of have to go backwards a few steps and try to get to folks before they reach that final endpoint. So, for example, if prohibiting gun possession by people who have a history of domestic violence, not who are just under a permanent restraining order, but who are under a temporary gun restraining order, people who have a history of misdemeanor gun violence, not just people with a history, with a felony history. So things like that might be able to curb some of the mass shootings.
Well
Jim,
stated.
can I add something, Jim?
Yes, Branch.
Going back to the comments of some of the prior panel members, I think it's important, and I'm sure we all realize this, but your initial questions, why the increase? Well, the increase in threats, not so much carrying out an act, but I'm convinced the reason, one of the major reasons for the increase in the making of threats is social media, anonymity. People think if they use social media to make a threat, they won't know where it comes from. They're making threats they would not make face to face. And the other side of that, social media is a fantastic investigative tool as well. And people think once they send something on the internet, it's like words. It's out and it's gone. But it is not like words. That information is out there forever. And like I say, a good investigative tool. And one more comment, Jim, before I want to make sure I get this across, and hopefully I'm not stealing any of Terry's thunder, but if any of you have an interest in, especially threats related to schools, Secret Service has a National Threat Assessment Center, NTAC, and they've had some fantastic publications they put out recently. Here's just two of them. There are 5 they put out recently that are great for information if you want more. The FBI has a program, a publication they put out. The Department of Education has a program and so forth. But there's some great current information available to those of us who want to get this information back to the people who need it. Of all these programs I've done on these DHS FEMA programs around the country for schools, I think this is, I'm always interested in programs like this, take homes. What have you got out of this conversation we can actually use? Here's one, and you mentioned that on the first panel, Jim. Of all the programs I've done, I say there's a 3-way learning process. Hopefully the attendees will learn from me. I will learn from them, and they'll learn from each other. I always get input from the attendees, and one of the best things I've learned over the last 15 years was a principal from a small school in California. And she sat her teachers down there, gave them a roster of their kids and said, put an X by all the kids you feel have a connection with. She collected that. She's not interested in the kids that the adults had a connection with. She wanted to identify that individual who did not have a connection with an adult. And she then said, give this kid 2 by 10. 2 minutes, 10 days in a row, and hopefully it'll extend beyond that. But let that kid recognize, and one of you brought this topic up a little while ago, how important it is to let them know that someone cares about them. Same thing is true with adults. And this principal said there was a notable increase in these kids' interpersonal skills and their grades in many occasions. Didn't work with everybody, but it helped a lot of these kids who were possibly the potential shooters. It works with adults. I have 3 examples I wish I could mention to you. When I was with Cummins Engine Company, when 3 adults were brought to my attention as potential shooters, I let them know who I was. I started to talk to them more and more as time went on. We formed a little relationship where now they had an individual in the workplace or in the school that if they had a problem, they had someone they could talk to. And sometimes I regretted that, as I said, and walking toward my office, but how important it is to identify these unconnected kids and adults in the workplace and establish a relationship with them, get to know them ahead of time. Let them know there's someplace they can go to vent their problems.
Thank you, Branch.
You're listening to a special presentation from the Broward County Crime Commission's 9th Annual Juvenile Violence Webinar Conference Series. Is society creating a nation of active shooter events? If you work in law enforcement, behavioral health, social work, or the legal field, Or if you're a concerned citizen, find out how you can be part of the next Juvenile Violence Webinar Conference Series on December 1st. By attending, you can earn continuing education hours. Yes, register for the next event on December 1st and earn continuing education hours in your field and work toward attaining the Crime Commission's distinguished Verbal De-Escalation Certification. Be part of the Broward County Crime Commission's 9th Annual Juvenile Violence Webinar Conference Series. Is society creating a nation of active shooter events? Hear the speakers, hear the ideas, learn solutions that we hope you will use in your profession, and earn continuing education hours. To register for December 1st, call 754 area code 423-1976 or register online at browardcrime.org. Again, call 754 area code 423-1976 or online at browardcrime.org. Brought to you by the Broward County Crime Commission. Finding solutions to problems.
So, Judge Martz, you're doing some outside the box things in Palm Beach County. We've discussed it on the phone that we want to have you share with us today, that because you're a big proponent, as we are minded in the Crime Commission, of trying to prepare to preempt and prevent. And I was really very impressed, and I admire what you're doing on that front. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about that, please?
Sure. When I first went to juvenile and started working in a division that had dependency and delinquency, what I saw was it would take you probably a good year to try and learn what your services were, at least the mainstream services available for our kids and families in Palm Beach County. Sounds like a good problem to have all those services, but the problem was geographically and specifically the services each provider would provide didn't often match the people you were sending to them. So what we had is frustration on frustration. We'd order some type of services. It would take 3 weeks to get to somebody to do the intake. They do the intake, then they get back to us in a week, tell us they don't comply because we don't serve that part of the community. They'd come back to us to their next court date a month later, tell us that they didn't start their services yet because they don't do that there. And then we'd go to the next one, and we were doing this trial and error thing working out. And I said, it's funny, this is, in my humble opinion, our most precious resource, our kids. How on earth do we not have a good system to be able to take care of our kids, especially the ones that need mental health services? I said, I need TripAdvisor for kids. If I can sign on and I can get an oceanfront property that has a kitchen, that has a pool, that has a restaurant in it, and I can put all those things in and say, I want a 3-star, and they serve, I have 5 people that are going to be staying in a room, and I push a button and I get all the locations that can answer all of those needs. I said, why can't I do that with kids? Why can't I have that? So we started with some of that stuff about 10 years ago. Then Stoneman Douglas happened. And when we came into it, the Law Enforcement Planning Council, which is mostly our chiefs, asked me to chair it and look at law enforcement's response to school safety. Well, that didn't work because everything we were looking at said law enforcement response, they got the message from Stoneman Douglas, need to work on the response. We're like most of Florida, where we've got 27 or so agencies here that have to work together when it happens. We got our one-man police department, the school board guy in the school who's got to call for help from the city they live in. It got all these different issues of communication have to take place. And we started working on that. We started making progress with that. But I'm big on bringing boots on the street in, not bosses. I don't want to hear what the policy is. I don't want to hear what the white paper said. I want to hear what's really happening in your agency. And what we found is they weren't communicating. Fire services wasn't talking to law enforcement. Their idea of command structure was different from agency to agency in each of my agencies. Their equipment was different. Their identification of what a hot zone, a warm zone, and a cold zone was during a shooting was completely different. We had some medics who were geared up and ready to go into a hot zone to render first aid. We had other guys that said, we got that thing that keeps the water off of you. That's all we got. And they weren't ready to respond. So we brought those folks together, and we're getting back to that now. And then we tried 911 and said, how do we fix our PSAPs? How do we fix our 911 locations so that we can get to the callers? We're still working on that. But the big thing that hit us upside the head was, going back to my experience with juvenile, our mental health services weren't communicating. Our schools' mental health was acting independently of our community providers. Nobody knew how to get people to services in different parts of the community, and no one knew where to go to try and get them if they weren't in the system yet, which was a big deal. How does somebody who sees aberrant behavior in their community, number one, confirm that it's aberrant behavior and it is important and it should be reported? Where do you report it to? All right. And then what are the services if I've got something in my family or a loved one or somebody else? So we started to build what we thought would be a hub. And believe it or not, this was crazy hard to build. We built this Aware and Care Palm Beach County site. It's a Aware and Care PBC. And it was through tremendous efforts of Catherine Schober from our CJC and the support of our new director there, who is Director Herring, and FAU. Their folks there, which was Dr. Atkin Plunk and her husband, Stephen Plunk, who designed it, Vaughn Critchlow, who helped design it, PBSO from their behavioral health unit. And that's our small group. Our big group is 40 agencies came together and said, we all want to be part of this. We want to communicate. We want to build this thing, and we want to be part of something special here where we can provide services when they're needed in a timely fashion to those that are seeking it. And we want to serve the people with what they need. We don't want them to get turned away at the door. We want warm handoffs. A Baker Act shouldn't be told, once they're stabilized, go find follow-up care. They need a handshake with the follow-up care. This is your doctor from now on. Set the appointment right now. Meet your aftercare provider and try and keep them stabilized. Stuff like that, which I think most of us in our normal lives would say, really, that's not happening? But it wasn't.
You're listening to a special presentation from the Broward County Crime Commission's 9th Annual Juvenile Violence Webinar Conference Series. Is society creating a nation of active shooter events? If you work in law enforcement, behavioral health, social work, or the legal field, or if you're a concerned citizen, find out how you can be part of the next Juvenile Violence Webinar Conference Series on December 1st. By attending, you can earn continuing education hours. Yes, register for the next event on December 1st and earn continuing education hours in your field and work toward attaining the Crime Commission's distinguished Verbal De-Escalation Certification. Be part of the Broward County Crime Commission's 9th Annual Juvenile Violence Webinar Conference Series. Is society creating a nation of active shooter events? Hear the speakers, hear the ideas, learn solutions that we hope you will use in your profession, and earn continuing education hours. To register for December 1st, call 754 area code 423-1976. or register online at browardcrime.org. Again, call 754 area code 423-1976 or online at browardcrime.org. Brought to you by the Broward County Crime Commission. Finding solutions to problems. We thank you for listening to When Crime Hits Home, brought to you by the Broward County Crime Commission, with James D. Polisi, President and CEO. Please share this podcast on social media with your friends.